Blind date disaster? The waitress dropped a note saying, "She's not who you think." The night was supposed to be simple, forgettable even, the kind of evening that slips quietly into memory without leaving a mark, but instead it began with a tremor that Ethan Walker felt deep in his chest, as if something unseen had reached through the crowded restaurant and tapped his heart with urgency. The warm glow of candles, the low hum of conversations, the clinking of glasses, all blurred into the background when a folded note brushed his fingertips, carried by a trembling hand that did not belong in the story he thought he was living. In that single, breathless moment, everything he believed about the woman across from him, about himself, and about the quiet ache of loneliness he had been carrying for years began to crack. Before the story pulls you any deeper, pause for just a second. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that can change a life when we least expect them, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that are still waiting to heal. Ethan had not wanted to come to the restaurant that night. A successful financial consultant in his mid-30s, living in downtown Chicago, he had mastered the art of appearing fulfilled while feeling profoundly disconnected inside. His days were filled with numbers, schedules, and polite smiles, while his nights echoed with an unspoken grief from a broken engagement years earlier that had quietly rewired his trust. Friends insisted that a blind date might be exactly what he needed, a harmless dinner with a woman named Rebecca, someone accomplished, charming, and supposedly perfect on paper. Ethan agreed not out of hope, but out of exhaustion from saying no to life. Rebecca arrived radiant and confident, her presence commanding attention without effort. She spoke easily, laughed at the right moments, and seemed to know exactly how to mirror the expectations Ethan had grown used to in professional circles. To anyone watching, they looked like a flawless match, the kind people point at and silently admire. Yet beneath the polished surface, Ethan felt a faint pressure in his chest, an instinct he had learned to ignore over the years. He told himself it was nerves, the residue of past disappointment, nothing more. Across the room, unnoticed by most, a waitress named Hannah moved quietly between tables. She was in her early 20s, a nursing student juggling night shifts to pay tuition, her life shaped by responsibility far beyond her age. Hannah had learned to read people the way others read menus. Years of observing subtle expressions, fleeting glances, and forced smiles had given her an intuition she trusted more than words. When she approached Ethan and Rebecca's table, she felt something unsettling ripple through her chest. Hannah noticed how Rebecca's laughter never reached her eyes, how her gaze scanned the room more than it rested on Ethan, how small inconsistencies slipped through her carefully crafted stories. These were not crimes, not proof of malice, but they awakened a memory in Hannah, one she had buried deep. Her mother had once been deceived by a man whose charm concealed intentions that left scars still healing years later. That past had taught Hannah that silence, when truth is at stake, can become its own kind of betrayal. As the evening unfolded, Hannah returned to the table several times, each visit strengthening her unease. Rebecca's phone buzzed frequently, always turned face down, her attention flickering like a faulty light. Ethan, polite and reserved, seemed unaware, his vulnerability hidden behind a practiced calm. Hannah struggled with the weight of responsibility pressing against her ribs. Intervening could cost her job, humiliate a stranger, or expose her own fears as projection. Doing nothing, however, felt unbearable. In a moment of quiet resolve, Hannah scribbled a message on a small piece of paper torn from her order pad. Her hand shook as she folded it, her heart racing not with drama, but with fear of being wrong and the greater fear of being right. As she placed the check on the table, she let the note slide gently toward Ethan, her eyes meeting his just long enough to silently ask him to trust a stranger. When Ethan opened the note, the words seemed to pulse on the page, unsettling and impossible to ignore. The message was brief but heavy, suggesting that the woman across from him was not who he believed her to be. His first instinct was disbelief, followed quickly by irritation. Who was this waitress to interfere in his life? Yet something in the urgency of the moment, in the memory of his own ignored instincts, made him pause. Ethan did not confront Rebecca immediately. Instead, he began to observe, really observe, with the attentiveness he applied to financial patterns and risk assessments. He noticed how her stories shifted subtly, how details contradicted themselves, how her interest sharpened only when conversation turned to his work, his investments, his connections. The realization unfolded slowly, painfully, like dawn revealing damage left by a storm. What Ethan discovered over the next few days confirmed Hannah's warning. Through careful, quiet inquiry, he learned that Rebecca had a history of targeting financially successful men, weaving short-lived relationships that ended with sudden emergencies and requests for help. There was no grand criminal record, no dramatic reveal, just a pattern of emotional manipulation that left people drained and ashamed. Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow, grateful to have been spared, grieving the illusion he had briefly allowed himself to hope Indiana. Yet the story did not end with relief. Ethan found himself thinking about Hannah, about the courage it took for her to act when it would have been easier to remain invisible. He returned to the restaurant days later, not to relive the night, but to understand the person who had altered his path. When he saw Hannah again, tired but determined, something shifted within him. For the first time in years, he felt a connection rooted not in surface compatibility, but in shared values and quiet strength. Over time, Ethan learned Hannah's story. He learned about her late father, a firefighter who had died saving strangers, teaching her that integrity mattered more than comfort. He learned about her mother's resilience, about the nights Hannah studied between shifts, about her dream of becoming a nurse to offer compassion where fear often lived. These conversations unfolded naturally, without pretense, without the pressure of expectation. They were not a fairy tale, but something sturdier, built slowly on honesty. Ethan also began to confront his own patterns. He realized how often he had chosen safety over sincerity, how he had mistaken polish for trustworthiness. Hannah's small act of bravery forced him to reckon with the walls he had built after heartbreak, walls that protected him from pain but also from genuine connection. In choosing to listen to a stranger's warning, he had unknowingly chosen to reopen his heart. As months passed, their bond deepened into something neither rushed nor forced. They supported each other through exams, career transitions, and moments of doubt. Ethan found himself volunteering at community clinics, inspired by Hannah's dedication. Hannah gained confidence, seeing her intuition validated, learning that her voice mattered even when it shook. Their lives did not merge dramatically, but they intertwined gently, the way strong roots do beneath the surface. The memory of that blind date transformed from a near disaster into a quiet turning point. Ethan understood that sometimes grace arrives disguised as discomfort, carried by ordinary people willing to act with extraordinary courage. He never forgot the folded note, now kept in a drawer, a reminder that listening can be an act of survival. If this story is touching something inside you, if it reminds you of a moment when someone's kindness changed your direction, please take a second to like this video, share it, and let us know you felt it. Your engagement helps keep stories like this alive. Just before we reach the end, we have a special request. Please comment below with the word kindness if you believe small acts can save someone from a lifetime of regret. Years later, Ethan would look back on that night not as the evening he almost trusted the wrong person, but as the moment he learned to trust the right instincts, the right people, and the quiet courage that often goes unnoticed. The blind date that nearly broke his faith instead rebuilt it, not in romance alone, but in humanity. And somewhere in a busy restaurant in the United States, a young waitress proved that sometimes the most powerful love stories begin not with attraction, but with a warning written by a trembling hand and a heart brave enough to care. Years passed quietly, the way meaningful lives often do, without headlines or dramatic announcements, but filled with moments that slowly, surely, shape who we become. Ethan often thought about how fragile that turning point had been, how easily he could have brushed off the note, paid the bill, and walked back into a life guided by habit instead of truth. That realization humbled him. It made him gentler with people, slower to judge, and more attentive to the unspoken struggles behind polite smiles. Hannah finished nursing school with honors, not because life suddenly became easy, but because she refused to let exhaustion rewrite her purpose. Ethan was there on the day she received her license, standing at the back of the auditorium, clapping harder than anyone else, his eyes burning with pride. He saw in her the kind of strength that doesn't ask for recognition, the kind that shows up every day and does the work anyway. Watching her step into her calling reminded him that success measured only in money had once left him empty, while shared growth filled spaces he hadn't known were hollow. Their relationship never followed a perfect script. They disagreed, sometimes painfully, about priorities, time, and fear. Ethan still carried scars from betrayal, moments when doubt crept in late at night, whispering that trust was temporary. Hannah, too, struggled with the weight of responsibility, the habit of putting everyone else first until she nearly disappeared herself. But instead of walking away, they learned to stay present. They learned that love was not the absence of fear, but the decision to face it together. One evening, long after the restaurant where they first crossed paths had closed for good, they returned to that street and stood quietly under the glow of a familiar streetlight. The city hummed around them, unaware of how much had changed because of one small choice. Ethan told Hannah that the note she wrote had not just saved him from the wrong person, but had given him back his belief that goodness still intervenes, even when it's risky. Hannah admitted that writing it had terrified her, but that she would do it again, every time, because silence had once cost her family too much. Life continued to test them, as it does everyone. Hannah worked long hospital shifts during overwhelming seasons, holding hands with strangers in their final moments, carrying grief home in quiet ways. Ethan learned to be patient, to listen without trying to fix everything, to offer presence instead of solutions. In return, Hannah reminded him to rest, to feel, to let joy exist without waiting for permission. Together, they became softer without becoming weaker. The folded note remained in Ethan's desk drawer, yellowed now, fragile at the edges. It was never framed or displayed, but it didn't need to be. Its power lived in what followed, in the lives altered because one person chose courage over comfort. Ethan sometimes shared the story with friends who felt lost, not as a warning about dating, but as a reminder that intuition often speaks through unexpected voices. If this continuation of the story has stayed with you, if it stirred something deep or reminded you of someone who once protected you in silence, please like this video, share it, and leave a heartfelt comment. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who may be standing at their own turning point, waiting for a sign. And before you go, we invite you to comment one simple word below: courage. Because sometimes courage doesn't roar. Sometimes it arrives as a folded note, a trembling hand, and a choice that quietly saves a life.